This is the IBJ podcast for the week of Monday, June the 2nd, 2025, brought to you by Taft. I'm your host, Mason King. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. With an estimated value of $4.8 billion, the Indianapolis Colts franchise is arguably the best-known family-owned business in Indiana. While we reflect on the passing of team owner Jim Irsay, who had significant influence on building the physical plant and identity of modern Indianapolis, we have the luxury of knowing that three more Irsays are in a position to continue that work and stewardship of the team. Daughters Carlie Irsay-Gordon, Kalen Jackson, and Casey Foyt already are co-owners of the team and have been entrenched for years as high-level executives in the organization. In particular, Irsay-Gordon has been so deeply involved in every aspect of football operations that it's widely assumed she will claim the role of controlling owner. These women have spent much of their adult lives preparing for this eventuality, but experts maintain that succession in professional sports is always a challenge, regardless of the circumstances. Jim Irsay seemed very comfortable in the public eye, and as a somewhat larger-than-life figure, his daughters have kept much lower profiles, so much so that many casual fans probably aren't aware of their existence. In this week's podcast, we're going to try to change that. IBJ has interviewed both Carlie and Kalen in past years, and we'll share excerpts here from those interviews that are relevant to this moment. We also have comments from one of the team's leaders on the field about his experiences with Irsay-Gordon and Jackson. Our live guest is IBJ's Mickey Shuey, who has a story in the latest issue of IBJ about the ways the three sisters have carved out roles for themselves with the Colts. He also explores how the NFL typically handles succession issues and what financial concerns the daughters likely will have moving forward. Here's our conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the podcast reporter Mickey Shuey, who covers the business of sports for IBJ. Every time you're on the podcast, Mickey, I say to myself, I don't think there's a way that Mickey could be more busy. So with the Pacers in the playoffs, Indiana Fever starting their season, and the Indy 500 just wrapping up, I appreciate you making time to talk about your story this week. I know that you have news for us about a new podcast that IBJ is offering.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's always a fun time to come on here. It was a very busy past few weeks here in Indy on the sports scene. Through that, though, a group of us here at IBJ have been putting together a new podcast called Beyond Clarkonomics, which essentially is going to be looking at how Caitlin Clark and the Fever, they're kind of that transition that the Fever are going through now after drafting her, has kind of turned the city on its head in creating opportunities for more women's sports events and bringing women's sports into Indianapolis more proactively.
Okay, that sounds interesting. How many episodes are you planning?
We're planning about 5 or 6. First episode is out now. So really excited for people to listen to that and learn more about not just the impact that Clark herself has had on the city, but what that actually means long term for the city's sports industry.
All right, on. Okay, well, we'll look for that. So we're recording this on Thursday, May 29th, which means it has been 8 days since Jim Irsay, Colts owner, and one of the most important figures in the modern history of Indianapolis, passed away at the age of 65. The Colts and the Irsay family have scheduled a private memorial service for Monday, June the 2nd, which is the day this podcast will be posted. One of the first questions that people have after an event like this is, what will happen to the team? And to Jim Irsay's credit, we for years have had a fairly clear idea of the outline of a succession plan. Irsay's three daughters, Carlie Irsay-Gordon, Kalen Jackson, and Casey Foyt, each have an ownership stake in the team, are vice chairs of the organization, and have worked for years as high-level executives within the franchise. We have let the Colts know that we are interested in speaking with the daughters as soon as they feel comfortable doing so. They obviously have a lot to work through, so it could take a few weeks at least, which is completely understandable. In the meantime, Mickey, tell us about the positions that the daughters currently hold in the organization.
So Carlie Irsay-Gordon, she's about 44 years old, and she's been really involved in the football operations side of things for many years now. In fact, she's also taken over for her father in instances where he's been incapacitated. Thinking back to the time that he was suspended by the league after an arrest for driving while intoxicated. He's had some health issues in the past, as we all know, where she's stepped into that role. But she's also represented the team at annual meetings, at other ownership gatherings, and she's also a consistent day-to-day presence with the team management. Kalen Jackson is 37, and she's really in charge of coordinating the family's philanthropic and community work. And she's also overseeing something that Jim Irsay himself has talked about a lot over the decades, which is mental health. The Colts mental health initiative called Kicking the Stigma. That was launched a few years back, and she's involved in helping fundraise for that and kind of provide grants to community organizations that are focused on curbing mental health challenges and fighting the stigmas that surround that.
Mm-hmm. Great. We'll hear more about that here in a few minutes.
Yeah. And then Casey Foyt, she's 42. She manages community relations and marketing for the Colts. She's been pretty hands-on over the years with that. She actually she got her start in the league by helping run one of the league's first non-North American game that was played in London back in, I believe it was 2007.
Oh, okay. No, interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So we have the three sisters. What can we say for sure about what leadership of the Colts will look like going forward?
So Carlie is expected to assume her father's position as controlling owner following his death. Colts officials haven't exactly given us a timeline on what a transition and leadership management changeover will actually look like. I mean, it's a little nebulous as to how that actually works in a situation like this. And of course, with them dealing with these things, I mean, the team spokesperson really was not in a position where they could speak about those things at this point, but said that in the coming weeks, more details will be made available.
Okay.
Now, to be clear, this wasn't necessarily a surprise in that there was going to need to be a transition at some point. So the Colts were pretty well prepared. I mean, every NFL team has a succession plan in place that they have filed with the league, and they update it annually to make sure that the owner's wishes are being recognized.
That's totally fascinating to me. So that is a requirement of the league.
Yes.
That there be a succession plan so there are no surprises.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, in instances where the team is being transferred to a family member, that can be executed without a formal vote of the owners. In other situations where they can choose to place their team in a temporary trust or put the team up for sale, that's a little bit of a different situation. So that typically will require league approval, league owner approval. And to be clear, these documents that the NFL has about succession, they're not made public, and teams typically opt to keep them private themselves, just, to protect the family as much as possible. But even so, it's widely assumed that Carlie's going to step into this role and take over her father's role as was considered a controlling owner.
Okay. And the sisters would remain as team executives.
Yes, that's the expectation.
Okay. Now, before we get too far, I want to open the podcast to a couple of interviews that IBJ has conducted with Carlie and Kalen in the last decade, just to give their past selves a chance to talk about their journeys to the Colts organization and their experiences as leaders there. So the first one is from 2015, when Carlie was honored as a member of IBJ's 40 under 40 class of 2015. Let's listen to what she had to say.
Obviously, I work with my two other sisters and my dad. I went to school to get my doctorate in clinical psychology. I always knew I was going to work for my family and work in our business, but I think it was something where I kind of wanted to do my own thing for a while, and then it just ended up, I ended up getting kind of sucked back in sooner than I thought. Football, it's funny, it's like football and psychology, there are a lot of common, I think psychology in general, any of those social sciences, you apply them to business all the time, particularly with just consumer behavior, fan behavior, even down to players and what makes a quarterback a good quarterback. It's not just their physicality. What do certain players have? What makes a good player, and then what makes a great player, and then what makes a Hall of Fame player. And I think every time you see one of those guys, they have these intangible things. It's a lot of it is their psychology. Working with people that we work with, a lot of it is, I'm like, wow, it'll remind me about, different theories. Are like, oh, that was, that we took like a solution focused approach to that, or, this person just needs a little cognitive behavioral therapy and they'd be better, Working the ticketing department for me, that was something, that I always felt was very important. So I started there because I felt like getting a good understanding of how ticket ops work, ticket prices, how we do those types of things, I felt was very important. And then, I kind of slowly branched off into more of the fan experience kind of area, which encompasses a lot of things. It can, encompass marketing, obviously ticket prices, but particularly in our stadium, we have ideas that we implement, during the season, but we're always looking, okay, how is this received? Is this something that people like? What can we do? I mean, it's every year, it's how can we continue to up the ante to make, our stadium and our game experience the best one in the league. And we feel like we always want to keep improving on that, because it's something that, buying a ticket to a game is a luxury. And we want people to continue to want to do, it's an entertainment luxury type thing. I mean, they could go to a play, they could go to another game, they could go on they could go on a vacation somewhere, and we want them to continue to feel like we're acknowledging that, by them buying in with us, we want to make them feel like this was worth their money.
Okay, let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 800 attorneys in 8 primary Midwest markets and the District of Columbia, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
All right, we're back with this week's episode of the IBJ Podcast and my discussion with IBJ's Mickey Shuey about the ownership transition for the Indianapolis Colts after the death of Jim Irsay. Okay, and now here is a slightly longer interview excerpt from Kalen just last year as the featured speaker at IBJ's 2024 Women of Influence event, and she's being interviewed by IBJ editor Leslie Weidenbender.
Well, tell us a little bit about growing up in a family that is as well known as the Irsays. In both of the places where you've lived, I mean, everybody knows who the Irsays are. So what has that been like?
People ask that a lot. And I think that growing up, my mom in particular, speaking of strong women, but both my parents did a really good job in trying to make our lives as normal as possible. I think that when I was growing up, it was a much different world. There weren't cell phones and social media and all that stuff, so it made it a little bit easier, I think. But of course, there were elements, I'd go to school in second grade and we had a horrible record at the time. And I would be told that by kids and like, you guys suck. And I'd have to, I think I laugh at it now, but it does teach you at a young age how to reflect on it, that that's not about you and that they associate you with something. And as much as that can be a big responsibility, I think my parents did a really good job explaining that to us at a young age, and that it's more coming from a place of passion and kind of learning how to put that part aside. And really, I think you at a young age realize how to know who you are, what you are, and not letting other people's opinions and things dictate how you see yourself and how you view your family. So yeah, of course, at times I wouldn't say it was normal. I think growing up and I look back on certain things that were exposed to and got to do, it's definitely not normal. But, my mom, like I said, we had allowances, we had curfews, we had all the normal things. We started as interns at the office and worked the switchboard and did all those things. And because that was an expectation, and we were raised to be humble and not talk about it in a way that it's any different than anybody else.
Did you know right away that you wanted to be part of the organization, or did any of that attention make you think, man, I just want to get out?
I think it wasn't necessarily about the attention, but I did have pause a time or two, making sure that this is what I wanted to do and not that it was just something that I was expected to do. My dad always gave us the permission to be whatever we wanted to be. And of course, he made it clear, like, I hope this is what you want to do because it's what I love. But I don't think that's any different than somebody who's like a doctor and really hopes that their son or daughter follows in their footsteps. But I think he also really saw what a woman leader in this space could do and change, because that wasn't so common when we were growing up. And he's always been a very proud girl dad and supporter of women, and really made sure not only did we have a seat at the table, but reminded us that we deserve to have a seat at the table. And so I think I definitely sat and thought, is this what I want to do? And I don't know if I really fully knew that until I finished, sport marketing and management at Indiana University, go Hoosiers, and went into my actual career and really got settled in it. I don't even know if I could honestly tell you that I knew for sure that's what I wanted to do until I was in it, because I think it's a hard thing to explain and even learn. Like I always say, I love Indiana University and I love that there are all these amazing sport management and marketing programs, but it's extremely difficult to teach sport in a classroom. So I think until you really get that experience, I don't know if I truly felt that drive that I did once I got going.
You mentioned that your dad was aware that there were not very many women in the NFL ranks. So when you first got started with the Colts, could you feel that? And how has that changed over time?
Well, I think, women have always been a priority at the Colts, and it continues to be. We continue to be champions for women in sport. But I think as I've gotten older and me and my sisters have gotten older, we've tried to think of more strategic ways to do that and be that for young girls. And I think it goes into kind of being raised in a humble way. You almost have this feeling of like, well, I mean, what am I really doing that they're looking up to? But when you have conversations with girls and they tell you why, you see it and you get it and you want to be whatever that is for those young girls. And having two young girls myself and having them tell me things like, when I say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they say, well, I want to do what you do, mommy. Or I want to do what you do, but I also want to be a mom. I want to be a vet, but I also want to be a mom. Like being able to know that hopefully I'm showing them that you can be both. You can be a strong business leader and also be a good mom and be there for your kids. Because it's hard. Life's hard in general, but juggling all those things can be really difficult.
I definitely want to come back to that, but I don't want to get too far before we talk about kicking the stigma. Can you tell us about how that came to be? What caused you all to start talking about it and then launch that initiative?
Yeah, we always pride ourselves in showing up in the community wherever there's need. I think we've always, as a family, it's kind of just in our lifeblood. Like that's what we believe is our responsibility. Anybody that has a platform or has the ability to affect the community. And I think also we're a big organization, but we're so ingrained in this community and the entire state. And we really, truly, that's part of who we are. We believe in showing up. And so we've never really had a thing that was our family's, initiative and or cause. We've always kind of showed up all over. And that has not changed. I always like to say, like, all the giving in those areas have not gone down because of this. This is just an additional thing. And my older sister, Carlie, kind of challenged me, like, if we were to have that, what would it be? And there are many things, it's not like mental health is the only thing that matters to us, but it was something that truly was the thing that's been a thread in our lives that has affected us. Me personally with anxiety, my dad with substance use disorder. There's depression and anxiety and substance use all throughout our extended family and friends. And it's not really something we've ever looked into. And when we started to look into the numbers in the state of Indiana, I felt almost upset that something that's meant so much to us and has affected our lives so deeply that we didn't know how bad it had gotten. And that we weren't showing up in that space. Like maybe, in little ways through other donations that we were doing, but not directly and not speaking on it either, which is a big piece. And so that kind of sealed the deal. And we did talk about it as a family, like, are we ready for this kind of thing? Because I think not consciously, but more subconsciously, we've always kind of avoided this topic. And I always like to say that The story for so long has always been told about us, and we've never really told the story ourselves and what power that has, and not only healing power for yourself, but healing power for others. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest pieces is sharing our story has opened up the door and given other people permission to do the same.
Okay, so that was Kalen. And I thought what was relevant for us today when she spoke about how deeply the Irsays feel connected to the Indianapolis community. Now, of the three sisters, Kalen probably has the highest public profile, which I think comes with the territory of representing the team and its philanthropic and community-focused efforts. We don't usually see much of Casey Foyt, although she was an important part of the Indy 500 just last Sunday.
Yeah, Casey is fairly private, but she was asked and agreed to wave the green flag, the honorary green flag, to start the Indianapolis 500. Of course, that was an interesting story in and of itself, the start of that race. But she was on the tower and she was wearing blue, of course, honoring her father, honoring the Colts, and she waved the green flag to start the race.
Yeah,
and that was a last minute change.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, we don't know who they were initially going to get. There's been rumblings, but they, like, Indianapolis Motor Speedway saw there to be an opportunity for them to honor Irsay, given, as you explained, his deep connections to Indianapolis, his family's connections, and of course, anytime you lose somebody in that important of a role in the sports community, you're going to see a lot of outpouring support and tributes to them.
Right, and there, I believe, was a moment of silence.
Yes.
You had roughly 350,000 people.
From what I recall, there was a brief moment of silence in the Speedway, and I mean, I think people recognize it as a somber moment, but also I think a lot of them kind of viewed it as, in their mind, Irsay would want the show to go on and people to just have a good time. So I think despite the somberness, people I think still were able to make a really good time out of the whole event.
Yeah, and of course, Casey was a relevant person to have in this role because she's married into the Foyt family, which I think most folks are aware of is the royal family of IndyCar racing, the A.J. Foyt family.
Yeah.
I wanted to add one more audio clip. Now, this was from Wednesday, which was our yesterday, when members of the Colts staff and team roster met with the media. These comments are from defensive tackle DeForest Buckner.
I mean, Carlie's always, since day one, I remember, back, like I said, when I got traded back in 2020, COVID, obviously it was all virtual meetings. And Carlie was in the D-line virtual meeting, you know what I mean? And it was the first time I've seen that. And it's just been the same ever since, you know what I mean? She's always in the meetings, whether it's team meetings, D-unit meetings, in the D-line room, on the field, almost every day at practice, and obviously on the sideline, seeing her. And, she's always got her big notebook, taking notes. And, obviously always asking questions about the game and little things like that, and just trying to continue to grow, to learn and study the game. And, it's been pretty cool to see over the years. And obviously, now it's going to be, her time to step up and take the lead. And, we all have great confidence in her.
You also have obviously probably spent a lot of time with Kalen, too. What sticks out about Kalen?
Oh, no, yeah. Kalen's also amazing. Obviously with everything that in the community and everything I've done, I've been to a bunch of different events with the community with her, and just everything that she's been doing on her front has been amazing for the organization. And, the most recent one that I was at was actually a couple months ago. We were at a hospital together, in the NICU department, and, handing out some swaddles and little things for, a lot of the parents and their baby parents and all those things. So, like I said, I think this organization is in great hands.
We don't usually see much of Carlie Irsay-Gordon, although I have to admit that I don't go to the games, where I understand she is very much involved on the sidelines. What do we know about Jim's health in recent years?
Well, certainly Jim Irsay battled some challenges over the years. Back in, I believe it's 2023, he was found, I believe, unresponsive in his home in Carmel. And there were a lot of questions at that time about kind of what that looked like, what the causes were. And the Colts have been very private about the extent of that, other than to say it was a health issue. But, Jim Irsay battled addiction for many, many years. And so, that, as he discussed, that took a toll on his health. So I think we've just kind of seen the past few years him kind of start losing that shine a little bit.
What do we know about ownership style? If we assume that Carlie Irsay-Gordon will be the controlling owner, can we expect her to try to run the franchise just like her dad did? Would she be so involved in on-the-field decisions that she might decide which of the Colts' 2 quarterbacks start this season?
So Carlie has been in owners' meetings for, I don't even know how many years now, probably at least 10 to 15. So she's seen how her father operates in those rooms, as have Irsay's other 2 daughters. But just because they've seen the way he operates as a very respected but outspoken member of the ownership group, the league's ownership groups, that doesn't mean that she's going to necessarily follow in those footsteps. She's going to carve her own path as an owner, as will the other 2 daughters as supporting owners. I was speaking with Mark Gannis, a sports consultant with Sports Corp Limited, a Chicago-based firm. He's gotten to know the Irsays a bit over the years, especially Jim Irsay. And he even said that Carlie can have a hands-on approach, much like her father did, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she's going to be making the decisions on who the quarterback is for the Colts, which of course is a very poignant question right now. She's going to be putting the right people in the right position to make those calls, whether that's Ballard and Steichen or other people down the line. The way Gannis put it is the best owners put the best people in the best position to succeed. And he expects that while she may not be making the final call on who that quarterback is or any of the other roster decisions, she's going to make important decisions on who is making those calls.
Got it. I'm glad you brought up that point. You know, I make the mistake of sometimes listening to sports radio on my way home. And I know prior to Jim Irsay's death, the pundits believed that general manager Chris Ballard was on a very short leash. So consider the source, of course. But I think that there was general agreement that if things don't work out with quarterback Anthony Richardson this season, Ballard probably would be fired. And you have to wonder, and I think there will be conversations in the media to this effect, you know, well into this next season, at what point Carlie Irsay-Gordon would feel comfortable changing GMs if that's what she decides needs to happen.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, she was already so entrenched in those decisions day to day. I mean, while her father had the final call on those sorts of things, she was still very much in the driver's seat for a lot of that. Like, she might like run up the flagpole and say, "Hey, Dad," or "Hey, Jim, like, what do you think of this?" at the end of the day. And he might say, "Good idea," or "Bad idea." But she was still the one who was doing a lot of the calls anyway. So I would expect that we're going to see a Carlie Irsay-Gordon who is very much empowered to make the decisions that she needs to make in order to make this football team successful. And while she might have that twinge of honoring her father's legacy, she also recognizes that, I think she would also recognize that her father wants to have a successful football team, and he trusted her enough to make her his successor. Meaning that he believed that she would make the right decisions when the time came. So I think she would be empowered by that.
If we look at the Colts as a business, what issues and opportunities will the sisters need to address going forward?
So the Colts have a lot on their plate right now, aside from everything we've already discussed, aside from the football challenges to the ownership transition. As a business, the Colts are looking to grow. They're trying to expand their reach outside of the U.S., as is every other NFL team, through the NFL's international program. This season, they have a game in Berlin. The first time that a game will have been played in Berlin, the Colts played in Munich, I believe it was last season. And so they're mounting a big marketing push to kind of grow that fan base, if you will, in Germany, and try and set down new routes to build the game overseas. And there's also talks on when discussions about improvements to Lucas Oil Stadium are going to commence, because stadium's about 17 years old now. And by the time a venue gets to be about 20 is when conversations now start about, well, what can we do to make sure it's top of class? And to be clear, there's been a lot of investment made over the years to upkeep that facility. About $100 million has been poured in there over the years by the Colts, by CIB, to ensure that that facility is up to snuff. But there's also the big questions of, like, what are the new and improved venues doing these days that the Colts don't currently have a capability of doing because of the setup of the stadium. So we're going to start seeing conversations on that come forward. Maybe not this year, maybe not next, but in the sooner rather than later, in the long-term scope of things.
Yeah. Now, then there's also the area around the stadium. I know some of that is in play. What's happening there?
Yeah. I mean, the Colts, a few years ago, the Colts, they bought up a lot of the property just south of Lucas Oil Stadium on the other side of McCarty Street. And they've been mainly continuing to use those as parking lots and game day festivities, things like that. But there's a conversation going on about, could they look to do something else with that property? I mean, surface lots are kind of a hot button issue right now when it comes to development, because they're sites that are ripe for opportunity. So I think we're going to naturally see some interest, whether from the Colts or from other developers, in what could we do here? I mean, we're already seeing on the other side of Missouri, TWG is building a 200 unit apartment facility just southwest of Lucas Oil Stadium. So I expect that we're going to see further development of that Stadium Village business district, as they call it.
Yeah, just in general. I mean, as if you've written in our Real Estate Weekly newsletter, I mean, there's now a lot of attention to the south side of Indianapolis, and that there are, I mean, obviously lots of new developments springing up. As you mentioned, there never going to be enough apartments in downtown Indianapolis. So that's definitely one of the things that we're seeing. Yeah.
And I mean, and we're also, like, there also remains questions, as there's been for 20, 30 years now, what the future of the post office facility is going to be downtown, just east of the stadium.
That's like literally the block to the east. Yeah.
And it's no secret that the Colts want that site if it ever becomes available. What they want it for, who's to say? I mean, there's plenty of options there.
Why wouldn't you want it?
Yeah. And of course, that site had also been considered for a soccer stadium when Indy 11 owner Ursula Özdemir was looking for sites. He ultimately landed on the Diamond Chain site, which, as we know, we all know how that's kind of gone so far.
Yes. When you search IBJ podcast, also search soccer.
Yes.
Soccer
yes.
and Mickey Shuey. You will have our series on just some of the incredible developments in the last 18 months.
But all that to say that the Colts see opportunities in downtown Indianapolis. Jim Irsay saw opportunities in downtown Indianapolis that of course he will never see the fruits of. But by having his daughters in position as his successors, there's an opportunity there. I think he saw that, and I think the Colts see that.
If we look at the Colts as an inherited asset, what issues will the Irsay sisters need to address going forward?
There's a few. First of all, the family's going to have to navigate federal tax codes tied to Irsay's estate. It's not really clear what the liability is going to be for that, and that's something we're still trying to further understand. But experts say that a standard 40% federal tax on large inheritances could mean a pretty significant sum for Irsay's daughters. Of course, they're not alone in this process. They're certainly working with family attorneys and Colts attorneys to try and figure out what all this looks like. But I mean, one of the big questions right now is whether Irsay's assets were indeed placed in a trust. And if they were, they'd be essentially taxed based on the difference in the value between when the assets were put into that trust and where they are now as they're being transferred to his daughters. That's according to Katie Charleston, an Indianapolis succession attorney.
Got it. And of course, we don't know what each daughter's stake in the team was.
Right. And that's not something that the Colts have shared or I don't expect they ever will share. But I mean, there's other opportunities there too, because I mean, we never heard the Colts say that they have any interest in offloading any portion of that the Irsays have any interest in offloading a portion of their ownership. But we've seen other teams, including the Buffalo Bills, which, I mean, they're a pretty prominently owned, family-owned team in the league. they recently added 10 investors, very small stakes in those teams that essentially provided an infusion of capital. And in a case like the Colts, if they gave up an infusion, or if they gave up a minority stake, that capital could theoretically be used as money that could help pay off taxes or fund other projects that they wanted to do. There's also the question of whether private equity might get involved. We've seen them come in a few cases. I believe the Miami Dolphins now have some minority stake given to private equity, or at least they're on the path for that. And we've seen that happen in other sports as well. But that could also help the Colts pay any bills on the estate.
What an incredibly difficult decision to make. I mean, when you're dealing with an asset that obviously is a family business, but I mean, there are 6 million people in the state of Indiana who sort of feel, in a sense, that it's their team. And how would the news that an ownership stake had been taken by a private equity firm, how would that go over? I mean, I'm assuming nobody would be super excited about it.
I don't think there'd be a lot of enthusiasm about that, to be sure. But I also think the context of the situation at the end of the day would probably matter as well. I mean, are they private equity can only take up to a 10% stake in a team. The Colts ownership is going to make the decision that they believe is best for the team and best for the family. And again, we've not heard the Colts say at any time that they have an interest or inkling of selling any portion of the team. And I don't know that that's necessarily on the table even. It's just an option.
This is only the realm of what's possible, not the realm of what's likely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, anybody who reads financial advice columns has heard multiple stories about families with multiple heirs to a great fortune of great value. The survivors don't always end up seeing eye to eye on the assets. Again, this is only in the realm of what's possible. What can we say to that?
Well, I mean, going back to what attorney Katie Charleston was telling me as I was reporting the story, I mean, she said, and I'm quoting here, that there's always potential for conflict, end quote, as it relates to any succession that happens involving multiple children. And yet, it's very unlikely in a situation like this because of the planning that went in by the Colts, the planning that goes into succession from the NFL, the fact that the daughters have been involved in the team for so long, and the fact that by all indications, they're very close to one another. So they all seem to be on the same page of where the Colts are and where the Colts are headed and what their father had built. So I don't think that we're going to see much friction there in terms of this transition. And Charleston herself said that because of the way this all kind of came about, she also expects that there's going to be a pretty seamless move over to this next generation of ownership.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, to the extent that, I can sort of sense the vibes of Indianapolis. I have not felt any anxiety at all in this city about what happens to the Colts next.
Yeah, I mean, you always see some things on social media, but it's few and far between, especially in a situation like this. I've frankly been a little bit surprised that there hasn't been more of the what do they call them, the negative Nancy's, if you will, about the future of the Colts, because I think a lot of people recognize that Irsay's daughters have been so involved in the franchise. Really, what it's coming down to on social media now is whether Carlie's going to make certain calls on management of the roster, and who she brings in to kind of oversee that long term. Does she keep Ballard? Does she have changes there? Going back to what we were talking about before, I mean, it's not necessarily are the Irsays keeping the team. It's more the Irsays are keeping the team. What does that mean moving forward?
Got it. When's training camp?
Training camp is going to run from July 24th through August 31st at Westfield's Grand Park. They've been up at Grand Park for several years now. And a real unfortunate thing with that is the day that Jim Irsay died, I had actually been talking to somebody that day about how they were planning for training camp up in Westfield. And then later that day, we got the news about his passing. So I know Westfield has obviously built a strong relationship with the Colts over the years with that. So I think in addition to what everybody else is feeling here in Indianapolis, I mean, it's not just limited to the Marion County line. It's all over central Indiana. And I mean, there's a lot of emotions right now related to this news, whether it was expected or not. But I think people are just looking forward to the season and hope springs eternal.
There you go. Well, I know you're super busy, so I'll let you get back to work, but thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me, as always.
My thanks again to Mickey Shuey. Please be on the lookout for Mickey's work in IBJ's latest limited series podcast, Beyond Clarkonomics. And before you do that, there are a few other stories in the latest issue of IBJ I want to draw to your attention. First up, Susan Orr reports on how Indiana entrepreneurs will be able to showcase their accomplishments to an international audience of their peers this week while picking up new ideas. Also in this week's issue, Daniel Bradley explains how residents of the Home Place neighborhood have come to grips with their annexation by Carmel and hope to carve out a distinctive identity for their community's business district. And Taylor Wooten has the unlikely and inspiring story about how the Wild Geese Bookshop in Franklin has developed a national reputation with authors. Again, you can find these stories in the latest print edition of IBJ or online at ibj.com. Now, it's quite a bit easier to access all of the latest business news and all of IBJ's data on Central Indiana's business, community, and economy if you're a subscriber. We're running a promotion right now that gives you complete access for $1 per week for 3 months, just to get a sense of how valuable and original our content is. Just go to ibj.com and click on the subscribe button. And thanks for making time this week for the IBJ podcast. I'm Mason King. Hang in there, everybody. We'll be back again next week.